Noah Jameson never thought he'd become the kind of man people whispered about behind closed doors. Once they celebrated him. He was the one they called reliable, a devoted son, a youth pastor at 25, a mentor, a friend, a man of his word. But all it took was one lie, and the silence of those who knew better. It started on a rainy Thursday, when everything changed with a single phone call. "Noah," his pastor said hesitantly, "I think you should step back from your position. At least for now. No explanación. No opportunity to speak. Just assumptions, silence, and a storm of rumors that moved faster than truth ever could. A young woman from his church had accused him of inappropriate behavior. No proof, no history, no real investigation. But people didn't need evidence. They just needed drama. He remembered the way his mother looked at him, not with disappointment, but with disbelief, as if she didn't recognize her own son. His father barely spoke to him. His girlfriend of 3 years blocked his number. His best friend didn't return his calls. Within a week, Noah had lost his job, his community, his family, and what little hope he had in human justice. He tried to plead his case. He tried to explain. He tried to pray. But heaven was quiet. The day the door closed, the worst part wasn't the loss. It was the feeling of being erased. People who once hugged him after service now looked away. Mothers pulled their children closer when he passed. He could hear their whispers like poison in the wind. He walked to the church one last time, hoping to speak with the elders, men he had prayed with, cried with, served with. But they wouldn't let him in. "We need to protect the reputation of the church," one said stiffly. Noah's hands trembled. What about protecting the truth? But no one responded. The heavy wooden door closed in his face. That night, he packed his life into a beat-up duffel bag and drove out of town with nothing but a few changes of clothes, an old Bible, and the deep, echoing pain of betrayal. Alone in the desert for the next few months, Noah wandered. He slept in his car, picked up odd jobs, cleaning gutters, loading boxes, mopping gas station bathrooms. No questions, no community, no names. Each night, he stared at the roof of his car, whispering the same question. Why had God allowed this? Why had the people who preached about grace been the first to turn away? Why did it feel like even Jesus had walked out? He still carried the Bible his grandmother gave him when he was 15. The leather was cracked, the edges worn. He didn't open it for weeks. Until one night, parked under a sky scattered with stars, broken and cold, he finally cracked the pages open. And it fell to the story of Job. "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." Noah let out a bitter laugh. "I'm no Job," he muttered. He was just tired. Tired of trying to prove something. Tired of silence. Tired of being unwanted. But something in that verse wouldn't let go of him. "Yet will I hope in him." He closed the Bible and whispered, "If you're still there, I don't have much hope left. But what little I do, it's yours." A stranger named Grace one morning, after a long night of restless sleep, Noah's car sputtered and died on a back road in a rural town called Shelter Ridge. A name he found ironic, considering he had nowhere to stay. He walked half a mile to a small diner called Ethel's Place. It smelled like burnt toast and fresh coffee. He ordered nothing, just sat in the corner, hoping no one would ask him to leave. A waitress approached, a woman in her late 30s with soft eyes and a voice that didn't match the world's cruelty. "You okay, hon?" she asked. Noah hesitated. "Yeah, just tired." "You look hungry," she said. "We got leftover biscuits." He started to decline, but she placed a plate in front of him anyway. "No charge." He blinked. "Why?" She shrugged. "Everyone has a valley." She walked away before he could thank her. Her name tag read, Grace. A place to rest later that day. He found a flyer tacked to a bulletin board at the gas station. Help needed. Small church in need of cleaning and repairs. Room provided. Pay minimal. Apply in person. He followed the address. The church was small, whitewashed, with a crooked steeple and weeds growing along the steps. A man in overalls opened the door. "Name's Pastor Ray," he said, shaking Noah's hand. "You here for the job?" Noah nodded slowly. "If it's still available." Ray studied him for a moment. Not suspicious, just quiet. "I can't pay much, but we've got a cot in the basement. Bathroom's old, but working." Noah's throat tightened. That'd be more than enough. And just like that, someone let him in. No interrogación. No resume. No questions. Just mercy. The night it all fell out a week later, Noah was scrubbing floors in the church sanctuary. It was late. Rain tapped against the windows. The whole world felt hushed. He paused to stretch his back, then sat on one of the pews and stared at the cross hanging on the far wall. Jesus, he whispered, I feel like you left me too. The words came easier in the dark. Everyone turned their back on me. Even the people who said they loved me. Even the people who said they believed in you. Tears filled his eyes. I defended you when they mocked. I gave my life to serve. I stayed when others walked away. A sob broke through his chest. But when I needed someone, when I was begging for someone to believe me, you were silent. He bowed his head into his hands, sobbing openly. And that's when he felt it. A presence. Not loud, not dramatic. Just there, like someone was sitting beside him in the pew. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't need to. Somehow, deep in his soul, he heard it. I never left. His breath caught. Even when they turned away, I stayed. Even when you doubted me, I remained. My arms were always open, Noah. He collapsed onto the floor, not in shame, but in relief. Because in that moment, he realized something so powerful it shattered every lie the enemy had told him. He had been abandoned by the world, but he had never been abandoned by Jesus. The basement of the little church in Shelter Ridge was cold, damp, and barely lit. But to Noah Jameson, it felt like a sanctuary. A cot, a table, a window cracked just enough to let the morning in. After months of drifting, he had found a place to breathe. He still didn't know what God was doing, or if he was doing anything at all, but there was something sacred about this quiet, invisible season. A wilderness, yes, but also a classroom. A gentle shepherd pastor, Ray, didn't ask questions about Noah's past. He didn't pry or probe. He simply gave him work, small things, cleaning the sanctuary, repainting the church's front steps, fixing the broken pews. Each day, they shared breakfast and scripture. Ray would read slowly from the worn-out Bible in his lap, pausing often, letting the words breathe. One morning, they read John 10. I'm a good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. I lay down my life for the sheep. Ray closed the Bible and looked at Noah. You know what I love about that verse? He said. Jesus didn't say he's the loudest voice. He said he's the known voice. Noah frowned. What's the difference? Sometimes God doesn't shout over the noise. He just speaks in a way that only your heart can recognize. That night, Noah lay on his cot and whispered, Speak again, Lord. I'll try to listen better this time. Grace returns. She came by the church that Friday with a box of baked muffins and a new mop. Figured you could use one, Grace said with a soft smile. Noah stood awkwardly at the door. Thank you. She shrugged. I know what it's like to start over. He blinked. You do. She nodded, stepping inside and placing the box on a table. Let's just say, people are quick to judge and slow to listen. Noah wanted to ask more, but he didn't. Instead, he offered her coffee, and they sat on the church steps, watching the sun begin its descent behind the hills. There was no rush in their conversation, no pressure, just silence and shared understanding. I've been angry, Noah admitted after a long pause. Grace didn't look surprised. Angry at people, angry at God. She took a deep breath. I was too, for a long time. But then I realized something. What? He didn't walk away. They did. Noah looked at her, and he realized. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for him too. The hidden work in the months that followed, Noah fell into a rhythm. He rose early, prayed, worked on the church, spent time in the Word. Not because he had to, but because he needed to. Each page of Scripture became a balm. Each prayer, even the desperate ones, felt like bricks being laid in a new foundation. He was being rebuilt from the inside out. And slowly his heart softened. He began to write again in a notebook Grace had given him. At first, it was just scattered thoughts. But then it turned into something more. Reflections, prayers, small revelations. God isn't afraid of my silence. He just wants me to stay near enough to hear when he speaks again. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's refusing to let the ones who hurt me define who I become. Jesus didn't stand outside my pain. He walked into it and stayed. When the world doesn't apologize, one rainy afternoon, Pastor Ray received a visitor at the church office. A well-dressed man in his 40s, clean-cut, sharp eyes. Noah was mopping the sanctuary when he heard the voice. It was Elder Warren, one of the church leaders from his old town. Noah's stomach twisted. He ducked behind a column and listened. "We may have acted prematurely," Warren said stiffly. "The accusations against Noah were dropped months ago. No evidence." The woman recanted. "But the damage," he sighed. "It was done." Ray said nothing. "We thought he might have ended up here." Still silence. Warren's voice grew quiet. "Would you ask him to consider coming back?" Noah felt his pulse throb in his ears. Ray finally spoke. "Why didn't anyone call him when the truth came out?" A pause. "It was complicated. We thought, you thought about your image." Ray interrupted, calm but firm. "Not his heart." Footsteps followed. The door opened and closed. Ray came into the sanctuary moments later. Found Noah, still holding the mop. "You heard?" Noah nodded. "I'm sorry, son." Noah shook his head. "Don't be." Ray tilted his head. "You're not angry?" Noah looked toward the cross above the altar. "I was, for a long time. But now," he exhaled slowly, "now I just feel sorry for them. They missed the chance to see what Jesus can do with a wounded man." More than the wilderness one night, Grace found Noah in the sanctuary writing by candlelight. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I think I'm finally understanding something." "What's that?" "This wasn't punishment. It was preparation." She smiled. "God's wilderness always is." They sat together, silent again. And this time, Noah wasn't afraid of the silence. Because in the stillness, he could feel the whisper again. "I never left you. And I never will." The storm rolled in without warning. Dark clouds swept across the sky like an army of shadows. Thunder rumbled low, steady, as if it had something to say. The air thickened. The birds fell silent. Noah stood on the front steps of the church, staring at the sky. He had seen storms before, but this one felt different. Inside, the lights flickered. Rain began to fall, then pour, then pound. Winds shook the window panes. The old oak outside groaned. Pastor Ray was out of town visiting his sister. Grace had left an hour earlier, promising to bring soup the next day. Noah was alone. But not for long. The breaking point at first, he kept busy, checking for leaks, closing windows, placing towels under doorways. But the noise of a storm seemed to rise with the noise in his own mind. Memories returned with the rain. The betrayal, the humiliation, the long nights in his car, the looks of disgust, the silence from people he once called family. All of it slammed into him like the wind against the stained glass. He dropped to his knees in the sanctuary, gripping the edge of the altar. "God, I need to know." His voice trembled. "Were you really there? When I was abandoned? Why beg you to speak?" And heard nothing. Lightning split the sky, lighting the room in a ghostly white. Thunder roared so loud it shook the floor. Noah shouted into the storm, tears streaming down his face. "Why did you let it happen? Why didn't you stop it? Why did everyone turn away? And you said nothing?" The storm outside was fierce, but the storm inside him was worse. And then silence. Not from the sky, from within. A stillness, a presence. He didn't hear it with his ears, but deep inside, in the quiet space of his soul. "I didn't walk away. I was weeping beside you." Noah gasped, hands trembling. "I wasn't silent. I was speaking through the people you overlooked, through the moments you wanted to forget, through the strength I gave you just to survive. When they turned their backs, I stayed." Noah collapsed forward, face against the altar, sobbing. Because in that moment, he didn't feel abandoned anymore. He felt held. The vision, he didn't know if it was a dream or a vision. But as his eyes closed, Noah saw something in his mind's eye. A dusty road, a crowd walking away, and in the middle of it, a man, barefoot, robed, radiant, standing still, arms wide open, eyes full of grief and love. Jesus. Everyone else walked away. But he stayed. He looked straight into Noah's eyes and said nothing. Because he didn't need to. The message was written across his face. Even when they turn away, I remain. I have always remained. Noah woke to stillness. The storm had passed, but something greater had shifted. His heart. A new morning the next day. The sun rose into a clear sky. The trees were bent. The road was wet, but everything felt washed. Grace arrived with her promised soup and found Noah already outside, fixing a loose shutter. "You okay?" she asked. He looked at her and smiled. Not forced or polite, but real. "I think I am." They ate together on the front steps. Noah told her everything. The tears, the questions, the whisper, the vision. Grace's eyes welled with her own tears. "I had a night like that once," she whispered. "When I realized I wasn't unloved, I was just listening to the wrong voices." Noah nodded. He stayed. She touched his arm gently. He always does. What healing looks like. Noah started attending Sunday service. Not as a worker, but as a worshiper. He stood in the back at first, hands in pockets, heart guarded. But each week, something melted. He sang again. He prayed again. He even laughed again. One evening, Pastor Ray approached with a folded note. "What's this?" Noah asked. Ray smiled. An invitation. It was a speaking request from a small men's group in the next county. They had read an article Grace submitted anonymously about Noah's journey and wanted to hear his story. Noah's hand shook. "I don't know if I'm ready." Ray replied, "Jesus will speak through the scars. Just show up." His first testimony, Noah stood before 15 men in a dim fellowship hall a week later. He told them everything, not to glorify pain, but to glorify redemption. He told them about the accusations, the silence, the car, the church basement, the storm, the whisper. He ended with one sentence. "I lost everything I thought mattered, but found the one who never left." The room was silent. Then one man stood, tears in his eyes. "Your story saved me tonight. I've been holding shame for things I never did, and I thought God had forgotten me." Noah stepped down from the podium and embraced him, because that's what Jesus would have done. The day after his testimony, Noah sat by the river just beyond the town limits. The water moved slow and steady like healing. He watched the ripples and thought about how far he'd come, not in miles, but in heart. He wasn't the man he used to be. He wasn't who he'd been when the world walked away. He was becoming someone new, not because of the world's approval, but because of Jesus' embrace. Grace. Gently over the weeks that followed, Noah began spending more time with Grace. What started as shared meals and light conversation turned into something deeper. They talked about past wounds and future hopes, about the God who stays and the fears that still linger. Grace never pushed. She simply sat with him, the same way Jesus had sat with her when her own life had fallen apart years ago. One evening, as they walked through the fields behind the church, she turned to him. "You know you don't have to be healed to be loved, right?" Noah looked at her. She continued, "I used to think I had to get my life together first, that no one would want a woman with a past. But Jesus didn't wait for me to be ready. He just waited for me to say yes." Her words sank into him like rain into dry ground. He had waited so long to feel worthy. But maybe being loved didn't require perfection, just openness. The ministry of the misunderstood. One afternoon, Pastor Ray handed Noah a binder. "What's this?" he asked. "Letters," Ray said. "From people who heard you speak last month. They're asking for help, guidance, prayer, hope." Noah opened one. It read, "I've been living in silence for 10 years after being accused of something I didn't do. I thought God had walked away. Your story brought me back." Another, "My daughter is struggling to believe she's still valuable after what's happened to her. I read your story to her, and she cried for the first time in months." Noah's hands trembled. Grace touched his shoulder. "Your pain has become a path for others." Ray smiled. "Want to do something more permanent with this." The birth of the Haven. A month later, Noah launched the Haven, a support group that met weekly in the church basement. It wasn't flashy. No big marketing. Just a few folding chairs, a coffee pot, and a room full of broken people who had been cast aside, falsely accused, wrongly judged, silenced, or shamed. Noah greeted each one by name. He listened without rushing, prayed without performance, and every time he reminded them, even when the world turned its back on you, he did not. Jesus stood firm. He stayed. He still stays. The return word of Noah's work began to spread. So did the truth about his past. One day, out of the blue, his old friend Elias showed up at the church. Noah was in the yard trimming hedges when he saw the familiar face. At first, all he felt was silence. Then Elias spoke. "I should have stood up for you." Noah paused. "I didn't believe the rumors," Elias continued, voice shaking. "But I didn't say anything either. I was afraid." Noah's jaw clenched. Years of pain stirred in his chest. But then, he heard another voice, a softer one, whisper, "Forgive him the way I forgave you." Noah stepped forward and extended his hand. "I forgive you." Tears filled Elias's eyes. "I don't deserve that. No, no I believe. But neither did I when Jesus forgave me." A house and a ring later that year, the church held a celebration to honor the growth of the haven. People shared testimonies. Families reunited. Tears flowed freely. At the end of the night, Noah and Grace stood by the river again. She leaned against him. "You ever think about staying here for good?" He smiled. "I already have." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring. Grace gasped. "It's not much," Noah said, "but I don't need perfect. I just need you with me." Tears streamed down her cheeks. Yes, wounds become windows. Their wedding was small, just like the sanctuary that had first held his tears. Ray officiated. The church family filled the pews. Noah stood at the altar, looking at the woman who helped him believe in love again. Not just romantic love, but divine, unconditional, relentless love. As he slipped the ring on her finger, he whispered, "You didn't just find me. You reminded me that he never left me." One more knock at the door one rainy evening, long after most had gone home. Noah heard a knock on the back door of the church. He opened it and found a young man, wet, bruised, eyes hollow. No words, just fear. Noah didn't ask for a name. He just stepped aside and said, "Come in." The young man hesitated. So Noah said what Jesus had whispered to him once, in his darkest hour, even when they all walked away. He stayed, and now so will I. The town of Shelter Ridge had changed over the past 2 years, but not as much as Noah Jameson had. He was no longer the man with trembling hands and haunted eyes. He was a husband, a leader, a shepherd of the outcasts. But most of all, he was living proof that Jesus didn't abandon the broken. He stayed. He healed. He used the shattered to bring others home. And now, Noah was ready to return to the very place he once fled. The homecoming had started with a letter. A young pastor from Noah's former town had reached out after reading about the haven. "We've heard what God is doing through you. Would you consider coming to share your story with our congregation?" It was the very church that had once shut its doors on him. Noah stared at the letter for a long time. Grace came to sit beside him. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but maybe Jesus wants to show them what love really looks like." And so they returned. Not for vengeance, not for closure, but for redemption. The message that changed everything. The sanctuary was packed the night Noah spoke. He stood behind the same pulpit where he once preached, now as a man refined by fire. He didn't open with condemnation. He didn't list names. He didn't demand apologies. Instead, he shared the valley. He told them about the betrayal, the silence, the nights in his car, the whisper during the storm. And then he paused. "I thought I lost everything," he said quietly. "But what I really lost was the illusion that human approval could ever replace the love of Christ." He stepped forward, voice steady. "You turned your backs on me. But Jesus didn't." The room held its breath. He didn't walk away. He didn't wait for me to fix myself. He stood firm, arms open, and when I couldn't crawl to him, he came to me. Gasps. Tears. "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to thank him. Because if I had never been cast out, I wouldn't have discovered who never let me go." He looked out at the crowd, eyes full of grace. "And now, he's using my scars to help heal others." Grace in the crowd after the service. People came forward, some weeping, some silent, some ashamed. One by one, they whispered the same things. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Can you forgive me?" To each one, Noah said the same thing. "I already have." Planting seeds, Noah didn't move back to his old town. He returned to Shelter Ridge, to his church, to his wife, to the community that God had used to save him. But something had changed. He now traveled off into other churches and cities, sharing his story and training others to lead havens of their own. The movement grew. Churches became places of refuge again. People began to confess their pain without fear of being judged. And Noah kept telling them all the same thing. Your story doesn't end with rejection. Because the one who matters most, he never walked away. The father and the son one Sunday morning, Noah stood at the church door, greeting families as they arrived. A boy, no older than 10, ran up to him, tugging at his coat. "Mr. Noah, I brought my friend today. He doesn't know much about Jesus." Noah knelt down. "Well, that's okay, because Jesus already knows him." The boy grinned. "That's what I told him." As the boy ran off, Grace approached, carrying their newborn son. Noah reached for the child, holding him close. "I'm going to tell you everything I wish someone had told me when I was your age," he whispered. "I'm going to tell you that the world will sometimes be cruel, that people will disappoint you. But Jesus," he looked into his son's eyes, "Jesus will never turn his back on you. He will be your anchor when you feel adrift, your light in the night, your shelter when the storm comes." Full circle years later, Noah stood on the same cliff where he once considered ending his life. He came back not as a broken man, but as a redeemed one. He brought with him a young man named David, who had just been released from prison. Abandoned, ashamed, afraid, David trembled as he looked over the edge. "I used to think no one could love someone like me," he said. "I don't think I can ever be whole again." Noah placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know how you feel." He paused. "But I also know this. Jesus doesn't run when things get ugly. He doesn't flinch at your pain. He stays." David looked at him, tears in his eyes. "Why?" Noah smiled. "Because that's who he is. The one who stays." Epilogue. The one who stayed the world will always have doors that close. People will walk away. Reputations will be shattered. Hearts will be wounded. But Jesus, he stays. When your voice shakes. When your name is slandered. When you're too tired to pray. He stays. With arms open. With a heart full of mercy. With love that never requires you to earn it. And if you're reading this story, wondering if that kind of love is real, it is. It's been waiting for you the whole time.